And we are live. Hello, everybody, all two people watching. Who's here so I know who I'm talking to? Ron will be a little bit late, and Doug should be here right at 3 o'clock, I hope. Although I haven't spoken to him today. I was supposed to do it. Ask me anything for one of his classes with him today, but I got so busy with work that I couldn't make it. And so I left him hanging. He had to do it by himself. And Ron texted me, let me know once again I have to show up with a monologue unplanned. Hey, Monica. Hey, Bert Jean Ray. Happy Tuesday. What's going on in the world today? Let's take a look. And we got a smirk. How you doing, buddy? How's Texas? For anybody else who's watching this on replay, you want to fast forward about 13 minutes to where we start the Constitution. This right now is the part where I got to sit here and entertain people with absolutely nothing planned. I did get an absolute kick out of a couple things that happened this week. We had probably the biggest lie from a White House press secretary in history. I'm sure you guys have all seen it. It's been all over the news, but Karine Jean-Pierre says that the Biden administration has lowered illegal immigration by 90%. And of course, Elon's new little invention, community notes in Twitter, just fact checks the heck out of her. Those community notes are driving the left nuts because they're getting called out on their BS, which is way overdue. All right, let's see what other news stuff we can talk about today. We had a really fun show on Sunday night with Alan and Doug. We got into Federalist number 11, and Anti-Federalist number 11, and really kind of tore the guy apart. Said he made some pretty bad arguments, but as we go through those, we find ourselves more and more agreeing with the Anti-Federalists. It's like they had a time machine. They said, yeah, the Constitution's great, but human beings aren't, and you don't have enough protections because sooner or later, someone will take advantage of the loopholes in the Constitution, and lo and behold, that's how we got our tyrannical government. So I'm actually really enjoying that. We'll be, and there's like 83 Federalist papers and like 39 Anti-Federalist papers, and we get to maybe one or two a week. So that show's going to be going on for more than a year. We got some good headlines. GOP senators tell Blinken to hand over Hunter Biden records amid questions about his role in the laptop story. So if you're not familiar, Tony Blinken is our Secretary of State, of course. And apparently he told us he never communicated with Hunter Biden. And yet we have a bunch of emails with him going back and forth with Hunter Biden. So he lied under oath to Congress. Nothing new for this administration. Do I think anyone will be held accountable? No, of course not. No one ever is. Maybe eventually. But as of right now, Merrick Garland's going to do nothing. But the big part, of course, was Tony Blinken apparently was the impetus behind the quote-unquote 51 ex-intelligence agents who said that Hunter Biden's laptop had the earmarks of Russian disinformation. Well, that turns out that was a load of caca. And, when they tell us, you can't prove election fraud, we could definitely say you stole the election. You weaponized the federal government against Trump to win an election. That is cheating. That's just as bad as stuffing ballot boxes. You're caught red-handed, and yet apparently we can't do much about it. Yeah, shocked indeed. I don't know. There's still some straight shooters in D.C., and there's still people like, hey, Durham's still on the loose. But, we still have things like Missouri v. Biden and other state cases. But I don't know. These tyrants don't seem to have any shame whatsoever. Let's see if I can find this one and play it for you. This is supposed to be good. Someone sent me this video. It's Trump talking about protecting college students in a campaign video. So I'm going to see if I can load that up. Yeah, Trump's doing great things on the campaign trail. He's been very entertaining. If you get a chance, you want to look at, if you haven't seen it, the Trump interview with Bannon was fantastic. I think it's at War Room Archive. Raging Smirk got to testify in Texas in front of the Texas House Elections Committee to ban Eric. Well, are they going to do it? And Texas also just cleared the LG. I heard there was an insurrection in Texas. I haven't seen the video of that yet. I'll have to look for that tonight. I'm trying to get this video to load. Here we go. Do a quick screen share. Let me know if you guys can hear this. It's not playing.
For many years, tuition costs at colleges and universities have been exploding, and I mean absolutely exploding, while academics have been obsessed with indoctrinating America's youth. The time has come to reclaim our once great educational institutions from the radical left, and we will do that. Our secret weapon will be the college accreditation system. It's called accreditation for a reason. The accreditors are supposed to ensure that schools are not ripping off students and taxpayers, but they have failed totally. When I return to the White House, I will fire the radical left accreditors that have allowed our colleges to become dominated by Marxist maniacs and lunatics. We will then accept applications for new accreditors who will impose real standards on colleges once again and once and for all. These standards will include defending the American tradition and Western civilization, protecting free speech, eliminating wasteful administrative positions that drive up costs incredibly, removing all Marxist diversity, equity, and inclusion bureaucrats, offering options for accelerated and low-cost degrees, providing meaningful job placement and career services, and implementing college entrance and exit exams to prove that students are actually learning and getting their money's worth. Furthermore, I will direct the Department of Justice to pursue federal civil rights cases against schools that continue to engage in racial discrimination and schools that persist in explicit unlawful discrimination under the guise of equity will not only have their endowments taxed, but through budget reconciliation, I will advance a measure to have them fined up to the entire amount of their endowment. A portion of the seized funds will then be used as restitution for victims of these illegal and unjust policies that hurt our country so badly. Colleges have gotten hundreds of billions of dollars from hardworking taxpayers, and now we are going to get this anti-American insanity out of our institutions once and for all. We are going to have real education in America. Thank you.
Well, that's pretty darn strong. That's what I love about what Trump's doing on the campaign trail. He's just going after issues, and he's on all the right issues. Colleges are ridiculous. As soon as the government took over college lending, it took the price cap. There's no accountability for colleges. Just prices skyrocketed. Now people are paying, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 a year for useless degrees, and that wouldn't happen in a market society. If the free market, if the private sector didn't value these degrees, the colleges wouldn't be giving them out. But that's what happens when government gets involved. You lose the entire incentive program, and of course, colleges answer to the people who fund them, and that's the billionaire class that fund their endowments, and that's where all this woke crap comes from. It's handed down from these think tanks and these. Don't get me started. So I don't know if the president has the power to do everything he's talking about doing, but it's a good start. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that's going to resonate with the younger generation or not. I would hope so. You know, I've been thinking, I don't think colleges are salvageable. I think the new education model is going to be in the private side. We already see the gigantic movement getting out of public high schools and grade schools. You know, that trend is not going to reverse. And of course, the fact is, you see in the exodus from blue states to red states, it's just going to exemplify that. The blue states are going to continue to fail. I don't know how many more times they're going to get their federal bailouts like they did during COVID. But, and the colleges got their bailout in COVID too. It's ridiculous. But yeah, these people are tyrants. We know it. That's why we're here. Got to find a way to stop it. But no, I just think I don't know what to do with our institutes of higher learning. If Trump's plan works, great. Free market solutions ought to do it. But these days, I can tell you that I don't even, I look at when I look at resumes, I start seeing something with an Ivy League on it. I'll throw that one in the garbage. I don't need that person. I don't need that crap in my office or in my business. I'd almost rather have what I look for, someone who's got like waitressing or waitering or restaurant experience. Someone who actually knows how to work with the public. I learned more bartending than I ever did in college. I know a lot of people feel that way. It's what we call credentialism, though. You get all these fancy letters after your name. So you've heard us talk about quite a bit. Yeah, so regarding Monica's comment about the show I did with Gordon and Michael, those two are really good researchers. Michael's a part of the lawsuit against Erickson for what they did in Iraq, getting Americans killed. But he goes into some of the deep rabbit holes that I like to play around in, and sometimes I get on a Twitter Spaces with him, and he gets invited on a lot. Sometimes he pulls me up to join him. We can go off for an hour and entertain people with talk about the CIA and all the shadow government, the powers behind the thrones. Well, I am about to do a deep dive and do an expose on a organization called, should I just drop the name? The Tavistock Institute. So give me 1 second. I need to give Doug a link. So the Tavistock Institute is one of the bigger culprits for a lot of the stuff going on today, and nobody talks about them much. So that is something I am going to reveal. I'm about halfway through my research, and bear with me 1 minute. And I'm going to have those guys on for the show as well to do that one. So should have a Doug any minute now. Yeah, I'll have to post the link right now. Hang on. Close it out, so I got to find it again. And here you go. Hi, Lisa. Oh, that was me posting as Ron. I'll put the link in for me. Okay. What are we talking about today? I lost my bookmark in the Constitution. I think we're in Article 1, Section. Are we in Article 2 yet, or did we finish 10? I don't remember. Doug should know. He's gotten really good at organizing, and he's got his separate constitution for each class he does, and he keeps a bookmark pretty well. I only do 2 classes a week with him, And I usually keep the one on the computer bookmarked, but I had to use it for a different purpose. And here's Doug.
Hello there,
Mr. Gibbs.
Mr. Hamster.
I didn't realize that my shirt was going to clash so badly with the background. I decided to dress a little tropical today to celebrate the sunshine. Maybe I'll change my background. What do you think?
You're fine. We can still tell where you end and the hamster begins.
That's a little better. How was the Ask Me Anything? And is everyone mad
Worked
at me?
out well. We had wound up with 4 new people. One of them, just because a friend told them about it. The other 3 were visitors to the Avocado Festival, and Judy was there handing out stuff, and all of them came up to me and, wow, that was fantastic. I said, well, that's just a Q&A. You haven't even got to the class yet. But so, yeah, no, it went really well.
Good. I'm really sorry I couldn't make it. I got so buried in work. I just, it was already 11 o'clock by the time kids sticking my head up for air, and it didn't do me much good to drive 45 minutes to be there for half the event. So sorry about that.
That's okay. I am able to run things on my own when necessary.
Yeah, you're quite capable.
That was kind of a tongue-in-cheek thing, since we every once in a while I have to kind of throw Brady or Alan into the fire, and they're on their own for a little while, and they're going, man, I'm by myself. And I'm kind of teasing them about that. But now you guys are definitely capable too. You guys don't give yourself enough credit sometimes.
It's the more you do it, the more comfortable you get. Like tonight,
Sure.
Today I had to do a 15-minute monologue, and it's getting easier each time. It's even much easier.
The wonderful thing about being a public speaker or a show host or things like that, and having a particular topic, in my case, Constitution and U.S. history, is that if you know it well enough, there's always something to say, and it's in your head. You don't have to hang on a second, let me look that up. And it's funny because when I first started doing this back in 2008, there were those moments where I'm like, good question. I'll get back to you next week. But now, I just think about my audience. I ask a couple questions. I know what I want to say. I did get a little bit on a soapbox a little bit today on a couple of the questions. And there was a few people saying, man, too bad we didn't record this, Doug. That was like the best you've done. And I'm like, I was just answering questions.
Well, we'll try to do that format some other time.
Yeah, no, it was a lot of fun. And like I said, we had a couple new people. So what we're talking about, folks that are watching here on YouTube, either in the chat room live without the chat room or later, is I teach 6 Constitution classes around Southern California. And the one on the morning during the Tuesday morning hours prior to this live broadcast is in Fallbrook. And that particular class meets at a church, a Baptist church in Fallbrook, and it's a pretty good group. And a couple of weeks ago, we finished the Constitution. So and Alan Myers, after I finished Constitution, Alan Myers is a co-host of mine on KMET Radio, and the host, the main guy on For the Republic. And after I finish doing Constitution classes, he comes in for a 4-week period, 1 hour per session, and goes through monetary system training, a little bit about Federal Reserve, and how to, as he puts it, take the heartbeats from the Federal Reserve. And then I start over with the Constitution from the beginning again. And because he is teaching a college prep school on Tuesday mornings over the last 4 weeks, he had to delay his start of doing his presentation at my Fallbrook class, next Tuesday. And it was at that time that, so I had realized I had 2 weeks to fill. And so last week we did a Brady show there at the Fallbrook class, because so in the following week, on the last day of the Constitution, did something silly and asked about the CIA. And the moment the letters CIA came out of their mouth, I said, I have an answer, but a better answer will come from, Brady. So I asked Brady, and he showed up last week. And the way they loved him so much, I almost felt like chopped liver, almost. I won my adoration from my fans back today, but they definitely belonged to Brady last week, man. I tell you, he just blew the roof off the house there, or the church in that case. Spent lunch with everybody. It was good. But anyway, today what we're going to do is a Q&A with Brady and I together. Brady couldn't make it, so I did it on my own. Now, that said, I'm going to say this while it's on my mind. Next Tuesday, I have an event in Camarillo, and I am leaving my area about 11:30. So I don't know how you guys want to deal with this program. If you want to just do a Ron and Brady show, or a Brady show, or what, I will be unable to be on the air next week, and I will not be in Fallbrook either. But Alan, that'll be his first week of running that one. So we'll discuss what to do with this program here next week. I'm going to assume you're going to want to do something. If you guys want to take a day off, that's fine. Audience,
Well,
stay tuned so you find out.
I have an idea.
You have an idea? What, I call in while I'm driving?
No, I can do the presentation I gave last week here on the. Because I did.
Yeah.
I was really bummed I couldn't record that one.
Well, so. Yeah. Now you can do it again and record it.
Yeah. What do you guys think? Anybody up for that?
Yeah. Well, what you'll need to do though is miniaturize Ron and make you the big screen so that make sure the edit button's there. When it comes to not that I'm teasing you, Ron, if you're watching, but it is the Brady presentation.
No, Ron will be able to contribute. He knows some of this stuff.
Okay.
So out there.
All right. So next week it's CIA and a hamster.
Yeah, this will be if you've seen my channel, the 3-part series, it'll have a couple more parts to it later on for the longer versions. I did 3 called The Rise of the Shadow State. This is more of a condensed version of combining the 3 with some new factoids. But the question that was on the table that summoned me to Fallbrook was, did the CIA assassinate JFK? And I kind of walked through all the circumstantial evidence, and you can draw your own conclusions.
And I was impressed because you basically took about 3 hours worth of presentation and condensed it into less than an hour because there was so much introduction. I mean, I think you pulled it off in about 55 minutes or something like that, or maybe you did go an hour or more, but we definitely started your part of it a little bit later. But I was impressed because I've seen you do enough of this stuff that you took a lot of information and made it very digestible and very very entertaining for that hour that you were speaking. So I was impressed for sure.
My introductory joke, which I'll let out of the bag now, is Doug likes to talk about how you go through his 20 weeks of Constitution class and you get done and everyone gets really angry about how bad they've messed it up. Well, I tried to get you just as mad in 1 hour.
Yeah.
And the only way I can do that is to talk about the CIA.
Well, and we'll end this topic before I get started on what we're going to talk about today on this. All from a guy who, when I said, come up here in front of the Zoom camera, he said, well, I don't know. Yeah. So, I almost feel like like I contributed to his rise to stardom here, but in the end, it wouldn't have mattered how much I, tried to get him to do it if he wasn't willing to get up in front of the camera. So really it is all Brady, but I will throw myself in a little bit and say, well, I encouraged him. I kind of pushed him. I kind of, moved him in that direction. But no, I'm very, very proud to say that I've watched you grow from the guy who didn't want to be in front of the camera to the guy who does podcasts, public speaking classes, and other stuff.
Well, everyone always talks about getting fame and fortune. I never cared about the fame part, but we kind of do what we must. It's my way of fighting back against the machine is to help wake people up and teach them stuff.
Yeah, we all have different roles, but what is impressive in your case, one of the things I've noticed is while you do a lot of teaching and speaking, you also walk the walk. It's like when you went out there to Fallbrook, not even your not even your district, not even your town, and you were up there gathering signatures for a special election for the school board because you cared. And like I said, and folks, seriously, not even his town, different part of the county. And he was out there walking the walk. So, you don't just, do the talk part. You are walking the walk. And that's very impressive. Seriously.
Oh, thank you. That's very, very kind praise coming from you. Thank you.
All right, everybody.
Because you have also been actively involved in this for a long time.
Sure. Yeah, and it's funny because I do enjoy being involved. All right, so people are always like, Doug, run for office. I have twice. We might get there again. We'll see. But anyway, Article 2, page 9 of the Pocket Constitution looks like this. If you've got one, all the other ones, just find Article 2. It's interesting when you get into the Constitution, the layout of the Constitution. Article 1, legislative branch. Article 2, executive branch. Article 3, judicial branch. It's laid out nicely. At what you see on the screen at the top, it's kind of nice. It says Article 2, executive. This is all about the executive branch, the creation of or the establishment of the executive branch. And while it's not in here, I am going to talk a little bit about executive orders because it begs to be mentioned when you talk about the establishment of the executive branch or what the executive branch is able to do. And as a matter of fact, I just went through this a couple times over the last couple of weeks in the Chino class. They're about the same place that you guys are right now. And so Article 2, Section 1 reads, the executive power shall be vested in a president of the United States of America. Now, I'm going to stop there because I want us to key in on a particular word, vested. The word vested also appears in Article 1, Section 1, Article 3, Section 1. The word vested is interesting because basically what it means is to transfer or to transfer legal authority or to grant. If someone is vested with something, there's someone who's receiving that vestment. There's someone who is given that vestment, just like granted. There's a grantor and there's a grantee. In this case, the grantee is the president of the United States. Now, the reason why the term vested is so important is, let's go back to Article 1, Section 1 just for a moment. You don't have to bring it up on the screen. I'll just say it. It says, all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress. Granted and vested are both in that sentence. If vested means granted, then it sounds a little repetitious. All legislative powers herein granted shall be granted to a Congress. But they didn't say it that way. They use the word vested because it means more than just granted. When something is vested in you, that means only you have it. It only belongs to you. It is exclusively yours. So it's saying here, the executive power shall be vested in a president. The executive power is exclusively a power of the president of the United States. But it doesn't just mean exclusive. It also means it's irrevocable. In other words, the president can't give it away. It belongs only to the president, and the president alone shall hold that power and not be able to give it away. It's exclusive. It's irrevocable. So executive power. Now, what is the executive power? Well, we go back once again, Article 1, Section 1. The legislative power is the power to create law, modify law, or repeal law. And someone says, well, gosh, the president's involved in that. Well, you mean if he signs a law, he can be. But if he vetoes it, guess what? The Congress can still get their way and make that law. So the legislative branch has that ultimate power over creation of law, modification law, and repealing law. That's what legislative powers are. Executive power comes from the word execute. Those two words are related. The executive power is the power to execute the law, to make sure that law goes into play, basically it's the administrative part of law, to administratively make sure it gets out there, that is put into play, that there are parts of the executive branch that assist or belong to the executive branch and make sure that that law is put into place. Now, when we talk about this, we automatically think about federal law on the domestic level. Let's remember that the original authorities of still the authorities, but the authorities of the federal government are few and defined, as Madison would put it. There's not a lot of them. And the majority of them are external, such as trade with other countries, immigration, securing the border, maritime law, foreign relations, things like that. There are only a few authorities given the federal government. They're internal. So executing the law of the union is going to primarily involve foreign issues, foreign commerce, foreign trade, and so on and so forth. So war would be another one. I know Brady's got all kinds of things to say about that three-letter word. Now, when it comes to internally, there's not going to be a whole lot of executing, but there is going to be some execution of law internally. Article 1, Section 8 of the United States Constitution, we've gone over this recently. One of the provisions says that the Congress shall have the power to provide for calling forth the militia to execute the laws of the Union. Instead of agencies and departments actually executing these laws internally, it really was supposed to be through the militia, guided by our sheriffs. That's a discussion for another time. So, executive power shall be vested in the President of the United States, the President's power, and it's supposed to be based on law that's created, and those laws are supposed to be based on authorities granted. So now, here's the question that everybody always asks. I'm sure it's on your minds. What about executive orders? So I'm going to go over this real quick because of the word vested. In the early parts of this, we'll get deeper into this article in a moment. Executive orders are interesting animals. We know what they're not. They're not legally binding because Article 1, Section 1, once again, says all legislative powers here granted shall be vested in a Congress. So in order for something to be legally binding, it has to be law that's put out by Congress. Now, this is not to say that something that's been executed isn't legally binding. Law is legally binding. So if the executive branch puts out an executive order to ensure that a law is properly carried out, that law itself is legally binding. But executive orders are not necessarily. Executive orders are really for the purpose of two things: internal communication with the executive branch and external communication with the country. The internal communication with the executive branch is, once again, to lay out the rules or the reasons or whatever to carry out a law. I'll give you an example. And this was actually went to court and considered unconstitutional. It was actually very unconstitutional. I believe the name of the act was the Walter McCarran Act in 1954. If anybody wants to try to look it up and correct me, that's fine, because I'm only about 75% sure on the name of the act. But this act, what it was, is it basically said that if a president feels that persons coming into the country from a certain country or whatever, or any other reason could be dangerous to the national security of this country, the president has the authority to temporarily restrict the entrance or the allowance of these people to come into the country. So Trump, using that law, and he names it in his executive order, disallowed persons from coming from, I can't remember if it was 7 countries or 9 countries. I think it began with 7, it went up to 9, from coming into the United States, from traveling into this country. They were from countries that had a history of sponsoring domestic, or not domestic, but just terrorism in general. And the list of countries, interestingly enough, coincided with a list that President Obama had come up as also countries guilty of sponsoring terrorism. Then the opposition to Trump went
racist.
Resist. And in fact, I'm trying to remember his name now. Last name was Khan. He was the father of a Muslim army soldier who had died in Iraq. And he's at the Democratic National Convention in in 2016. He's waving this blue pocket constitution. I didn't know they made constitutions in Democrat blue, but nonetheless, and it looked like it was pristine. And he says, "Hey, you can't do that. You know, it's a violation of the Constitution. You can't have religious tests." Well, first of all, President Trump did not take away the ability of those persons to come into the country because they're Muslim, but because they're from countries known for sponsoring terrorism. Number one. Number two, even if it was about religion, it still didn't violate the Constitution. A religious test, which is mentioned in Article 6, is specifically related to office holders. There can't be any religious tests when it comes to holding office. The reason why I bring all this up is that was an executive order that to carry out, to instruct the executive branch here. This is the law, the McCarran Act, the Walter McCarran Act of 1954. Here's the provision. Here's what we need to do. TSA, carry this out. Internal communication with the executive branch to carry out the law. The law itself is legally binding. So when I say an executive order is not legally binding, I'm not talking about this part of an executive order. I had this discussion on Monday last night with somebody because they were confused. When I say an executive order is not legally binding, I'm talking about when it's used for external purposes, and we'll get to that. But the internal purpose, it is to instruct, it's an internal communication, carry out, execute this law. That's what it is. George Washington's first executive order, which they weren't called executive orders back then, they were called presidential proclamations. The term executive order became used during the Progressive era. But I believe it was while Teddy Roosevelt was president. George Washington's first executive order was an internal communication, just like I'm talking about here, with the executive branch saying, okay, we're new at this. Department heads, all four of you. There's only 4 departments. All 4 of you. What do you think your job is? What's my job? How can we work together on this? We're learning. We've never done this before. This is new. Of course, I'm paraphrasing. That was basically George Washington's first executive order. It was an internal communication with his department heads, his secretaries, Secretary of State, Secretary of War, Secretary of the Treasury, and the Secretary of the Department of Justice. So that's a part of what an executive order is. The other part, getting back to that word, proclamation. It's an external communication to everybody else. It's not legally binding. How do we know this? Once again, Article 1, Section 1. To be legally binding, it needs to be accompanied by legislation. This is not a piece of legislation. It's an executive order saying, hey, everybody, this is what we ought to do. Proclamation, declaration, whatever you want to call it. Getting back to George Washington, one of his most famous executive orders of his high number of 8 was the Thanksgiving Proclamation. Now, once again, external. Now, this is an external communication. It's not internal to his branch. It's an external communication to the people. And he's saying, hey, I've got an idea. I think on the 4th Thursday, back then it was the 4th Thursday of November, we should thank God for our, good fortune as a country. To give thanks. Let's have a day of Thanksgiving. And here's the proclamation I'm delivering, saying so. Not legally binding. If you did not celebrate Thanksgiving, if you didn't give thanks to the Lord on the 4th Thursday of the month of the year that proclamation went out, you weren't arrested. It wasn't law. It's a proclamation. It's a declaration that says, hey, we think this is a good idea. Let's do this together. Another proclamation might be the one that Ronald Reagan put out for the National Day of Prayer. Once again, not legally binding. It's an external communication saying, hey, on this one day a year, we ought to come together as a country and pray. But it's not legally binding.
We really should.
If you don't kneel on your knees, you're not going to be dragged off to the gulag.
We probably shouldn't be calling those executive orders.
Well, they're not. The reason I use the term executive orders, that's what everybody knows them as. But you're right. Yeah. The whole idea of an executive order, presidential proclamation, is that it's not legally binding. The word order is not a word that the founding fathers would have included in that, because there's no order about it. He's got no authority to order anything. He can make recommendations, or he can order his executive branch to carry out a law that's on the books. But from an external standpoint, it's not legally binding, and the word order is really is a misleading term. One more executive order I'd like to bring up, just because, especially now that Ron's here. Hey, Ron, how's it going, brother?
It's going all right. How are you?
I'm going to bring up one of your favorite executive orders of all time, the Emancipation Proclamation. I thought you would grin about that one. It was, well, like all other proclamations, it's not legally binding. So if it's not legally binding and it's ordering somebody somewhere to be emancipated, guess what? It's not legally binding. It didn't free anybody. Besides, not only did it not free all the slaves, as we are told, because it was not even legally binding, but if you read the language of it, it didn't even talk about most slaves anyway. It was only directed at slaves in Confederate state territories or regions in which the Northern Army occupied the region. They were proclaimed to be free. Of course, I can proclaim all kinds of things. The president can proclaim all kinds of things. It doesn't make it so. It's not law. So whenever someone says, well, Emancipation Proclamation freed the slaves, your first response should be, no, the 13th Amendment that is currently in the Constitution freed the slaves.
The second 13th Amendment.
I know that's the reason why I said the word currently in the Constitution, but yeah. Right.
Ron, technically,
I don't want to open up that portal at the moment.
Technically, it's the third 13th Amendment, because there was another 13th Amendment proposed that was defeated.
Yeah.
And that was about 10 years
ago. Because it was
okay.
defeated, it really didn't become an amendment, so it wasn't really the second. It was potentially the second.
In the papers of the day, they had talked about it being the 13th Amendment.
Right. So what happens if the missing 13th Amendment is made active again? Do we have 13A and 13B, or we just change the 13th Amendments in the Constitution to the 14th? Just move everything up a number.
I think the missing 13th becomes the 28th.
Okay, we could do that too. All right. So anyway, I wanted to explain all that.
I think the missing 13th should assume the position of the 17th.
Since we want to get rid of the 17th anyway.
Well, and we got to find one to take the 16th out too, Ron.
I agree.
I know you do. Good to see you, buddy. Hey, real quick, before you go on, Ron, one of the things I've been meaning to do is this link to the Constitution that I always have up in the window is the one I have bookmarked on all my different browsers. I thought I'd share that with the class. It's probably the easiest one to sort through online. So there you go. Happy birthday, everyone.
Where? Huh?
Let's put it in the chat.
Okay.
Ron, you need to be a guest on a pirate radio.
How much longer?
Yeah. That's what Raging Smirk said. Don't get mad at me.
I know. I saw it.
How many more weeks? How many more weeks do we get to have to use up? All
I don't know. The gas bubble is it's dissipating, but it still isn't annoying enough that I wear it. I only really wear the patch when I'm doing videos. Outside of the videos, I don't wear it.
Okay. Just
because of the lights.
Gotcha.
Isn't there a pirate-like show experience in Buena Park? You better be careful with that. They might think that you're a member of the staff. But anyway, okay. Yeah, I'm gonna miss the eye patch when it's finally gone.
A lot of people say it's grown on them, and I should keep it. No.
Get a couple of long earrings. Do the head thing like Captain Jack Sparrow.
No.
Act like a drunk Keith Richards. It might work.
I didn't know. Is there such a thing as a non-drunk Keith Richards?
Well, that's a good point. Well, that's what Johnny Depp was asked. How did he come up with his character? He says, I imagine Keith Richards very drunk and act like that. That's why they later on had Keith Richards play the pirate that played his dad, because of that statement
Hmm.
on the show or movie. But anyway, back to work. All right, so executive power shall be vested in a president of the United States of America. The executive power not holding legal authority in the sense of external communications. It is not legally binding. Well, let's say one more thing about that now that I'm thinking about it, because there's something in the news. So yesterday, lovingly known as May Day to all the communist, socialist, Marxist bastards out there, was the effective date for an executive order that instructed the Federal Housing Administration to make a rule change regarding federal mortgages that have, I don't know if it's just FHA loans or if it's all mortgages, but the federal fees are higher if you have a better credit score. I think it's over 680. If it's under, then it's not so much. It's an attempt to do what the Community Reinvestment Act did, but without causing a recession. Oh wait, it's doing the same garbage. It's going to cause a recession down the road someday. But anyway, because what it's doing is it's encouraging lending to persons who are high risk borrowers.
That's actually rewarding.
High risk borrowers.
It's actually
folks.
rewarding. As I understand it, it's rewarding people who have bad credit.
Right.
Yep.
But what it does is it encourages them to borrow to get a mortgage so that home ownership is more equitable. Well, that's what the Community Reinvestment Act was about. Now, number one, Raging Smirk, you nailed it. It violates the Equal Protection Clause. First of all, any federal or state law is supposed to treat everybody equally under the law. Number two, you cannot be deprived your right to life, liberty, or property without due process. So are we being punished for owning property or making it harder for certain people to own property? And should that be allowed without due process? Number three, how can an executive order make such a change? Is this a law change? Oh, no, Doug, it's a rule change. Oh, well, then that means that the rules are already established in legislation. Well, no, but legislation allows the executive branch to make rule changes. No, because the word vested applies to them too. They can't give away their power to legislate. Get what I'm saying again, right? So, and then finally, where in the Constitution does it give the federal government the authority to monkey with mortgage, have mortgage fees, so on and so forth? Well, Doug, are you saying it shouldn't be regulated? No, I think the state should be involved in something like that if they feel it's necessary. If you want the federal government to have that authority, fine. Well, let's propose an amendment. Otherwise, they don't have the authority. Whether you like it or not, whether you think it's a good idea for them to have the authority or not, they don't. If you don't like the fact that they don't, then let's get the amendment proposal going. Any comments, gentlemen?
Nope.
I was asked to talk about this the other day. And what you see happen is government likes to create crisis in different sectors so that when the banks, 10 years time, when this creates a problem, the banks will have to come with their hand out. And if there's a Democrat in power, like Clinton did in 94, or like Obama did in 2009, what they'll do is say, yeah, we'll bail you out, but it's going to come with some perks, or, it's going to come with a couple of contingencies. And so with the Community Reinvestment Act was part of a bank restructuring. And basically they wanted banks to start lending into the inner cities. We saw the results. In 2009, when they bailed out the banks, Obama put some strings on it. And basically that's where you got all this woke stuff. That was Obama policies being imposed upon the banks by the federal government. And that's why they started getting into this ESG and woke stuff. That happened in 2009. And, there was a famous weekend during the campaign where on a Friday, Obama was down 5 points in the polls. Well, that day, Lehman Brothers, or Bear Stearns goes down. McCain was still on the campaign trail. Obama flies back to New York to meet with the bankers. Woke up Monday morning, he's up 5 points in the polls, and not a single banker ever went to jail. So yeah, deals were cut. but that's how the government leverages the financial institutions. And that's why you can't trust them. Well, one of many reasons you can't trust them.
All right, very good. Executive power. So now let me repeat what we've been going over and then go a little further. Executive power shall be vested in a president of the United States of America. He shall hold his office during the term of 4 years, and together with vice president chosen for the same term, be elected as follows. I'll get into that in a minute. So 4 years. How long do members of the House of Representatives hold office?
2.
2 years. How long do members of the U.S. Senate hold office?
6.
6. President, it's 4. Notice that none of the numbers match. You want to make sure that there's a constant change somewhere, that there's no chance. Well, of course, this is assuming that we don't have professional politicians that don't leave. That's beside the point. The idea here is to stagger and move around these years so that there's no chance for, or at least there's little chance for collusion. Members of the House are changing all the time. So if the Senate wants to, or the president wants to try to collude with the House, well, every 2 years, you got a new person to try to collude with. That's not a lot of time to work with them. Senators and president, well, the senators, they're longer than the president or shorter, depending on if the president gets 1 or 2 terms. So this difference in numbers, the reason it's there is to try to diminish the chance for collusion. Of course, you will never get rid of collusion completely, and tyranny is a funny thing. Even when tyranny is guarded against, it always seems to find a way. So be aware of that. But these mechanisms are in place to at least try to reduce the likelihood of such collusion from happening. Now, the next paragraph gets into what the Electoral College is. Each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislature may direct a number of electors equal to the whole number of senators and representatives to which a state may be entitled in the Congress, but no senator or representative or person holding an office of trust or private under the United States shall be appointed an elector. Same rule goes with the conventions. An office holder is not supposed to be a delegate in a convention. One of the exceptions to that rule was the Constitutional Convention. There was a number of those present that were office holders. But none of the ratification conventions allowed office holders to be voting delegates. Office holders were present at the convention, but none of them were voting delegates. Same thing with these electors. You can't be an elector and an office holder. We've got a conflict of interest here, so it's not allowed. But this is interesting. Each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct. The legislature isn't automatically appointing the electors, though they could. In fact, in those early elections, 5 of the states, the legislatures did appoint all of the electors. The other states, the way they decided to do it was a mixture between the people and the state legislatures. Let's say you have a state that has 5 electoral votes because they have 3 members of the House and 2 senators. Well, what they would do then is their 3 members of the House are voted into office based on districts, and those districts then would be used for the people to vote in their elector. There's 2 elector seats remaining after that. The 2 that are appointed to the state or given to the state, should I say, because of their 2 senators. One of those choices would go to the state House of Representatives, state Assembly, state House of Delegates, whatever you want to call it. And the other one would go to the state Senate. So the state House would choose one, the state Senate would choose the other independently. That is how 8 of the states did it in those early elections. So 8 did a mixture, 5 actually the legislature themselves. It's funny because for years I would say, well, I'm not sure exactly the number, but so I decided, screw it, I'm gonna go look it up. So I did. So but 5 of the states did, where the legislatures themselves just appointed all the electors. So, you know what? Not going to trust the people in our state. We're just going to do it ourselves. That's fine. Yes.
Did George Washington run unopposed?
That's a tricky question. He essentially did, but there were some minor candidates.
Did he win unanimously?
I believe the second election he did. I'm not sure that he did on this first one. I'm not positive. I'm trying to remember. There's so much info in my head. I can't be sure. But if I remember properly, I'm not sure if he got the full on the first election. I think it was his re-election where he was completely unanimous on the electoral votes. I could be wrong.
So there's an important point in this paragraph. Anytime you're arguing with somebody whether or not we're a democracy, and I've run into this quite often online. I explain. I go, okay, well, tell me what the makeup is of the electoral college, and it's obviously, you one elector per senator and one per Congress critter.
Yeah,
but Congress critter is based on population, and so that would be considered popular vote or democracy. The senators, the fact that it's distributed among the states shows that we are a federal republic. That is a confederation system. It is not a democratic process. So we don't even choose our president democratically. We are not a democracy. It is by design, is evidenced by the makeup of the electoral college.
Well, and actually, one of the ways that we can understand that is this. And I'm going to ask Ron this because I know he'll be quick to answer. Hey, Ron, do you want the president of the United States sticking his nose into your life?
No, thank you. I'll pass.
No, thank you. I'll pass. So if you don't want the president involved in your life, the federal government's nose doesn't belong in your life, then why is it we should by popular vote for who's president? Well, because his job isn't to rule over us. He's not our ruler. So he's not for us to vote for. That's who the governor is. Not that he's a ruler, but the governor is going to be closer to us in our day-to-day lives than the president. So the governors have always been democratically voted in. But the president really is not the president of the people as much as he's president of the union. He's handling the external stuff. Who benefits the most from what the president does? The state legislatures, the states. This is not to say that the position of the president should not be important to the people. It is important to the people. And early on, the people did campaign for these presidents. They weren't directly voting for them, but they did campaign for them. Hey, we want Mr. Jefferson or Adams or George Clinton or Aaron Burr or whoever. And they would campaign for the candidates. The people did. That was their way of being involved in the presidential election. If in their state, the state legislature decided to allow the people to vote for a few of the electors, great. If the legislature didn't, fine. It was up to the legislature. Why is it up to the legislature? Because they're the ones who are benefiting from the presidency. They're the ones who the president really represents. They're the ones that are not having to figure out who to send as a delegate for a treaty or a negotiation for trade or something like that, because now the president's going to do that for them. So should it not be more in their court on who the president of the United States is? Makes sense, I would think, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, it's funny because even conservatives, they get all upset when I start talking about this stuff. Yeah, but what about our voice? You have a voice. There are ways our voice is important, but in any situation, if you give all of the power to one voice, it becomes, in the case of the people, mob rule.
Yeah.
And we joke also because you hear this all the time. Yeah, this person believes that. Crap, these people vote. Well, that's right. So do we want to give them the ability to vote on everything? No. There are mechanisms in place to split it up, to mix it up. There's an old saying, and I wish the people who want to go full electric car and full electric this and full electric that would remember this as well. You don't put all your eggs in one basket. And it's funny because every time I've talked to financial people about my financial stuff, that's one first thing that comes out of their mouth. Diversify. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Well, doesn't that apply across the board? Why would you want to put all of your eggs in a democracy basket of only the people voting? Or all of your eggs in only the basket of only digital currency? Or all of your eggs in one basket of only electric cars and electric appliances? And don't worry, the electricity will never go out. You diversify. That's just a common sense rule of life. And that's what the founders did. They diversified. They mixed it up. Brady, I have a feeling there's something going on in your head right now.
Yeah, but it's not related to what you're talking about.
I just see that look on his face. I'm like, there's something going on in there. Based on what I am talking about, though, and I know you, because of your licensing, you have to, give certain PSAs about what you say before you say it. But let me ask you this, and you can even just give me yes or no. When it comes to diversifying, putting all your eggs in one basket, especially when it comes to your economics, your financial well-being, but really everything, doesn't that seem like it's the way to go? Is don't put all your eggs in one basket?
That's generally considered a pretty good rule of thumb for investors, but you will find that it's the fat ends of the distribution curve where if you want to make more money than anyone else in the world, you have all your money in the stock that goes up more than any other stock. That's how Bill Gates did. He never diversified his Microsoft position until it was already worth, billions and billions of dollars.
Yes.
So one of the things we spend a lot of our time doing is working with people who have these concentrated stock positions, and we have to talk them out of taking that risk. Say, look, it's okay if your stock goes to the moon and you only have half of it, you're still doing pretty darn well. Let's just make the likelihood of success a little bit better.
Because what if? There's always that what if, right?
Mm-hmm. And that's basically our business model.
Right,
Conservative Cowboy brought up something really interesting, and I was going to hope we could talk about it on Sunday, but there's a case making it, the Supreme Court's decided to hear arguments on it. They're basically going after the Chevron doctrine from 1984, which basically meant the courts could
They're
never.
they're going up to Chevron deference, which basically is it gives the agencies the ability to fill in the blanks between what's law and what is.
The key holding is that the Supreme Court basically said that no courts can overturn an agency's decision if they were, I guess, empowered to do so by Congress. This will change that quite a bit, and it's a pretty strong case.
And it actually goes back to what I was saying earlier. They can't be empowered by Congress. It's not their place to interpret the law or make a law or modify a law or determine if something's a law or not. That's all up to Congress. I was reading about this. I was going to say last night, but really it was about 3 or 4 this morning. I went to bed I think 4:30. But I've seen this coming down the pike. I haven't gotten into the details of it yet. That's the way I understand it. It could be, and there's a lot of pundits that are thinking this could go by way of, because of the current court, this could go by way of taking a lot of power away from these agencies, the power to interpret.
Yeah, the EPA in particular is screaming bloody murder over this one. Mm-hmm. Because they've used environmental rules to just basically they've been a holy terror for the last 30 years.
So does the ATF. The gun channels were all talking about this morning.
Great. I'm glad. People need to be aware. People need to be aware of this one. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, because this is because essentially that's what the ATF does. The ATF, they change their mind more than a 16-year-old girl going on a first date of what to wear.
I was trying to come up with one when you were saying that. That's a good one. I like that. Okay.
I wasn't sure when you started with a 16-year-old girl if that was going to turn out good, but it did. So nicely done.
Yeah, it's but it's as I understand the process, because it was explained. One guy explained it, says if they take it up, then oral arguments will be heard in the fall, and then a decision will be rendered probably with by this time next year. And
just in time for election time. Of course, I'm still reeling over, and this is way off topic, but I've got to throw it in there. I'm still reeling over something that I watched that Brady sent, where and I'm not going to tell you what the video was about. I'm just going to give you the statement that 2024 is going to be the last human election.
Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna have to put that link in chat.
That video really opened my eyes on a lot of stuff. I knew AI was a problem, could be all kinds of things, but when you've got scientists saying, yeah, we created this thing, we got no control over it, we got no idea what it's doing or how it's learning what's learning and how it's coming up with exponentially with it, so I'm like, holy crap. I mean, it's a pretty intense video. Now, as a sci-fi writer, I suddenly have a series of 18 books I want to write, but I don't have time for it. So,
yeah, that link was sent to me by the Lady Hamster. And she's a pretty good researcher in her own right.
Yeah. Tell her I'll be glad to be on her reception list for stuff too, man. Because holy moly, but it was good. It was important. Okay, that all said. So that YouTube link that Warhamster just put into the chat is for that video. And for those of you who, let's do this real quick. Oh, stop it, Petey. He's over here snorting. Stupid dog. So for those of you who have not seen the video or don't know what I'm talking about, just so and you're not, or you don't see the chat, you're just listening, I want to give you the opportunity. Let's see. Oh, hang on, why am I not seeing the title here? The video.
I have no idea where you're going here.
There we go. Well, I wanted to get the name of the video on the below the screen, but for some reason it's not letting me do that. So hang on.
Talking about the one I just posted.
Yeah, hang on a second. That's because of the way
I'll do it. I'll do it in 2 seconds.
I'll have to do it later. But anyway, what was the name of the video? If they want to look it up by title,
just put it in chat.
Okay.
Yeah. It's all right, Doug.
But anyway,
you don't always have.
All right, let's get back to work. But this has all been good. I'm sorry.
So you don't have to be a master of technology. That's not your forte.
The AI dilemma. Thank you. Yeah, I spend more time grumbling about technology, be honest with you. I hate it when I go places like restaurants, they're like, okay, so what's your phone number? And I've actually just a couple times, knowing that they would do that, made sure my phone was like in my truck or my front pocket so you can't see it I've got it or whatever. I say, oh, I don't have a cell phone. One of them actually gave me a beeper thing, and they were ready for that. The other one's like, well, then we can't put you on this. I can't eat this restaurant if I don't have a cell phone and there's a wait. Can I talk to your manager? And this one guy's background, like, who doesn't have a phone? Like, I couldn't imagine such a thing.
God, I can imagine.
I actually know a few people who don't have cell phones. That's the reason why I like to kind of play that game.
I imagine it every day. Okay, when all this stuff we're dealing with is gone, I'm going to unplug for about 5 years. You will not be able to find me. At least that's the hope.
So each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislature there may direct a number of electors equal to the number of senators or representatives. What this does is this allows the rural areas to have a little bit more voice also in the electoral college. I want you to I want to remind you of something else. It was not winner take all. How the elector voted is how they voted. Could you imagine if we're in California, the three of us, if in California they did that, it wasn't winner take all? Or in any of the states with large populations, it wasn't winner take all.
Yeah, if it went by counties, we'd have a totally different country.
Absolutely. All right. Then the part in the brackets. has changed, but I'm going to go through it and I'll explain the changes. The electors shall meet in their respective states and vote by ballot for 2 persons, of whom one at least shall not be an inhabitant of the same state as with themselves. This also is in the 12th Amendment. People think that means that 2 people from the same state can't run for president. That is not what it's saying. That is saying that electors from a state cannot vote for two persons from their own state for president or president and vice president, as it goes in the 12th Amendment. You say, well, gosh, Doug, what if DeSantis and Trump runs from Florida? Well, they can't run. It says so in the Constitution. They can't be on the same ticket. It's not what it says. What would happen is they both president and vice president couldn't get electoral votes from Florida. One could get, or the other, depending on which elector it is. Of course, that is also assuming that the presidential and vice presidential ballots are separate, distinct ballots, which they're supposed to be, but they're not. That's a whole different conversation for when we get to the 12th Amendment. So let me continue. Electors shall meet in their respective states, vote for by ballot for 2 persons, of whom at least one shall not be inhabitant of the same state with themselves, and they shall make a list of all the persons voted for, and of the number of votes for each, which list they shall sign and certify. It's the first time the word certify appears in the Constitution. And transmit sealed to the seat of government of the United States, directed to the President of the Senate. The President of the Senate shall, in the presence of the Senate and House of Representatives, joint session, open all the certificates, and the vote shall then be counted. The person having the greatest number of votes shall be the president, if such number be a majority of the whole number of electors appointed, and if there be more than one who have such majority, have an equal number of votes, then the House of Representatives shall immediately choose by ballot one of them for president. Notice what's going on here. The number 1 person is president, but it continues. It gets interesting. Pay real close attention. And if no person have a majority, then from the 5 highest in the list, the said House shall in like manner choose the president, but in choosing the president, the vote shall be taken by states, representation from each state having 1 vote. A quorum for this purpose shall consist of a member or members of 2/3 of states, and a majority of all the states shall be necessary to a choice. In every case, after the choice of president, the person having the greatest number of votes of the electors shall be the vice president. But if there should remain 2 or more who have equal votes, the Senate shall choose from them by ballot and the vice president. President and vice president was not separate president and vice president ballots. The electors voted for 2 people for president each. Each person got an electoral vote. The number of electoral votes was actually double the number of electors because they're voting twice. The person to get the most majority is president. Second place winner is vice president. Second place winner is vice president. It's not separate president, vice president ballots. They're separate ballots, but for 2 different people for president. Congress may determine the time of choosing the electors and the day on which they shall give their vote. Wait a second. And
that was poorly thought out. I just have to say that was poorly thought out.
Well, yeah, that's why the 12th Amendment changed it all.
I know.
Which day shall be the same throughout the United States? Wait a second now. Election day, it says here, Congress determines the time of choosing electors and the day on which they shall. Does that mean that this 2-week, 3-week, 4-week voting election period is unconstitutional?
No, it doesn't, Doug, because this talks about when the electors give their votes, not when the people vote.
But the people aren't supposed to vote.
Well, they can if the state legislatures want them to.
This is true, but it wasn't originally intended.
Mm-hmm. But this does not mean that election month is unconstitutional because that's only talking about the electors.
The Congress may determine the time. Okay. Because I've been thinking about that. I get asked that a lot.
You got asked that by me. You got asked that by me a number of months back, and I went and looked into it a little bit more and changed my thinking on it.
Okay. Every once in a while, I get schooled.
Mm-hmm.
it's 4 o'clock, and my favorite one is next. So I'm going to hold it off till 2 weeks from now.
Oh yeah, Natural Born Citizen.
And this is one I'm a thorough expert on.
You don't
That's
have
a
an
topic.
opinion.
There is no arguing with me on that one.
No, you don't have an opinion on that at all.
No, not at all.
So Ron, it's just the two of us next week, and before you got here, we're trying to decide what we're going to do for the class, and I proposed that you could be my co-pilot, and I'm going to go through the CIA presentation I gave live in class last Tuesday. I think you'll enjoy it, and you've got a
Is
lot
that
of this.
something that we can even talk about
Uh-huh.
on YouTube?
Yeah, I can keep it very much under the radar.
Okay.
Heck, they made Hollywood movies about the assassination of JFK. We can get that one out there.
Okay.
So I think you'll know a lot of the information I bring up, so you'd be a perfect co-pilot on it.
There's a lot of stuff coming out right now about CIA involvement in 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of stuff coming out. It's we did Gordon and I. We talked about on our show last night. We talked about it was To Kill a Mockingbird. Talking about basically just all the things that are coming out about the CIA.
Well, the CIA actually stands for Can Infiltrate Anything.
They do. They do. That's the whole point. They infiltrate everything. What they I got this from the book Secret Team. L. Fletcher Prouty. What he talked about, what they would do is they would bring somebody into a location, and then they would the whole idea was they would as long as that person was there, they would report to the like to the boss or to the CEO or to whatever and then when what would happen, what Prouty said was, when that person who was the boss moved on, they would leave the asset in place but no longer report. So that person would be in position as long as they were alive or were, and yeah, they've done that. People that you would never think that would be CIA agents, like people like janitors. You would never know it. But I mean, they've got judges, they've got Congress critters.
Yeah, they're nice people. But we'll have some fun stuff to talk about next week.
Yes, we will.
Yeah, because I'll be on my way to Camarillo. So I will be unable to. As a matter of fact, I'll be arriving in Camarillo probably about the time the show comes on or during this show. I have an event out in Camarillo next week. So, gentlemen, the show is yours next week. Brady, thanks for being jazzed about grabbing the reins.
My pleasure.
Cool. Well, then enjoy your time, and we will see you in 2 weeks then.
All right, we'll see you then.
You want to give me a
United we
sign?
stand, combined we kick butt. God bless America, my friends. God bless you. We'll see you next time.
Cheers.